He is my buddy from the NFL Network, NFL Media Group, and also goes way back in the day, walking on the wild side with Dennis Rodman, and with Rodman front and center and The Last Dance being something that's taken up a ton of oxygen in our sports room these days with no live events and no live sports. I figured let's have the co-author of Walk on the Wild Side, a man who was back in the day with Rodman and someone who also knows what's going on in the NFL today, my buddy Michael Silver. How are you, Michael?
I'm great, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How did you get involved with Rodman back in the day, Mike? Let's just jump right into it with both feet.
Well, I was hired by Sports Illustrated in late 1994, and we, in 1995, we had just finished an infamous media summit, which, as good as the NFL media summits have been in recent years,
Yes.
This was a boondoggle of epic proportions out in Orlando. And Jordan ended his retirement during that, and they actually, sent Rick Riley hastily out to go work on that, and it shuffled some things. And I came home pretty dog-tired. My wife wasn't loving me, and I got a call that said, you got to get to L.A. We want you to do a story on Dennis Rodman. He was on the Spurs. They were getting ready to close out the Western Conference semis against the Lakers at the Forum. And my first reaction was, oh, man, you're killing me. But I knew it had the potential to be a good match. Rodman was just getting weird kind of overtly, had been involved with Madonna recently, and I figured we'd either really get along or not so much. And I don't know, I must be a little twisted because we proceeded to go on a 4-day, 3-state odyssey with very little sleep, a lot of Pearl Jam blasting, gambling in Vegas, coaches yelling at him, then GM Greg Popovich yelling at him, and I wrote what turned out to be an SI cover story in real time at his house after we'd had a nice dinner at a gay bar, I think dinner at a strip club, went to a gay bar. He was in another room with a stripper friend making some loud noises, and there were some exotic birds all over the house, even louder, and somehow I wrote that thing and then wrote the lead in the morning as more zaniness ensued. So, it was a blast, and then we proceeded to spend a lot of time together in the next few years, and it helped kind of kick off my SI career. And at one point we were on a plane, Rich, and about day 3 of this, and he looked at me and he said, "You are bleeped." And I looked up and he said, "Yeah, man, after this everybody's going to be boring. I'm the most, no one's going to be more open than me. No one's going to be more fun than me." And I kind of laughed and thought, yeah, he might be right, but we're gonna enjoy this.
Was he right?
Yeah, I mean, in some senses he was right. I mean, I always feel like I can bond with people and get access and get compelling stories, and there are people who obviously are doing very serious, important things that, you and I try to highlight and talk to. But in terms of living out loud and letting your freak flag fly in the sports world, it was pretty significant, and, in a much different time. And I don't know how much of it was truly appreciated at the time because of that, but he was a guy who felt like he was weird inside and was afraid to let that out for a long, long time, and he was afraid because he thought he'd be reviled and mocked. And when he finally started to, he was shocked that so many people in society who felt marginalized or similarly really warmed to him and celebrated him and felt like he had spoken for them in a way that really touched him. And a lot of these people weren't basketball fans, and specifically the LGBTQ community and the transgender community specifically. He was very openly kind of sending the message that these people were like us and totally okay, and that also that maybe they were being, unfairly looked upon. And I think that a lot of that kind of got lost amid the noise and the hysteria and the fun, and there was a lot of fun, but he was really, ahead of the curve on that.
Mike Silver, my compadre from NFL Network, NFL Media Group, reminiscing about his Rodman days when he was covering him for Sports Illustrated, and then wrote a book with him, Walk on the Wild Side. Why do that book after he was already as bad as he wants to be, Mike? Why do that?
Well, it's a sad story, Rich. So after that SI cover story came out, which was the iconic cover with Rodman and the zip-up metallic tank top and the bird on his shoulder and all that, a publisher approached me, and I approached Dennis, and we were going to do it. And I had just gotten to SI. I really didn't know what that would mean in terms of time commitment, and I was their new football guy. Literally, Rick Tellender left a couple months after I got there, and they wanted me to be the lead football guy, and I didn't know what that meant either, but I knew that it was going to take a lot of work, and this book was going to have to get done timing-wise during that first season first full season I was covering in '95. So, I talked to my bosses. We tried to see if it was workable. They felt like it wasn't going to be workable on their end, and I ended up helping them find Tim Kuhn to do that book, partly because I knew Tim would crush it, and he hit it out of the park. It was a phenomenal book, and it worked out amazingly and sold a ton. And I was obviously a little bummed I didn't get to do it, but I knew the product was phenomenal. And then I was pretty amazed that they then came back to me and said, "Hey, we got a nice deal for a sequel. We want you to do it." And I'm thinking, Tim did a pretty good job on that first one. I totally get it, but it was amazing. The discussion to whether we were going to do the second book together. Literally, it went like this: Dwight Manley, his then agent, said, "Listen." By now he's on the Bulls. They're playing the Sonics that's a team in Seattle for you young people.
Right.
Seattle Supersonics in Game 1 of the 1996 NBA Finals. And so Dwight says, "Listen, just fly to Chicago, go to the game, and we'll, he said, we're all going to go out afterwards. We'll drink all night. We'll do our thing. And then, the next day at breakfast, we can nail this down." So I just flew to Chicago, and I didn't know where I was sitting, who I was sitting with. And, I grew up with Steve Kerr, so I was already feeling, pretty excited about the 96 Bulls. I knew Jed Bushler through Steve, and, now, of course, Dennis is on the team, and, Jordan's back in the finals. It's a pretty cool scene. And so I go to pick up my ticket, and it's courtside. Okay, cool. Wonder who I'm sitting with. A guy comes and sits next to me, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Jeff." I'm like, "Oh, hey, Jeff." Totally cool, chill dude. I'm like, "Oh, it's Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam." Of course. Nice, sweet. Big Sonics fan, so that was fun. So I proceeded to watch that epic game, Jordan going up against Gary Payton and et al., with the bassist from one of my favorite bands of all time. And then we all went out that night. There was this short guy who probably hadn't showered in a while, a little skittish at the time, hanging out with us. "Oh, there's Eddie Vedder. Cool." And, really, that kind of stuff wasn't uncommon going out with Rodman, although, Eddie Vedder was a pretty big deal, of course. But, there was a big fun scene with people from all walks of life. And I think, in those days, that's why Rodman, really felt so invigorated and so emboldened to just let it fly, because he wasn't seeing it as just basketball. And I have plenty of conversations with him where I said, "Hey, dude, rebounding. Like, I know you think you're a movie star. I know you think it's bigger than all this, but you got to stay great at the one thing that you're the best at. Don't forget." And, but as things kind of went on, that scene changed, and more people around him, I felt, were just egging him on to be Dennis Rodman, the Freak Show, and there were fewer people who came into that scene as legitimate entities who did their own thing, and I think it got harder and harder for him that way. And I'm proud of him for persevering and hanging tough and still being in the mix. And he's definitely not a perfect guy, but he's tried very hard to not let it all collapse.
Mike Silver here on the Rich Eisen Show. So you're watching The Last Dance, I imagine, and you see the Rodman episode, and Carmen Electra, who I'm sure you crossed paths with back in the day then, if you were right in the middle of the Rodman orbit when The Last Dance was actually being played. Did you learn anything? What were your thoughts when you watched that? Mike?
It was interesting. I was all over the Rodman 30 for 30, and that was really cool. And so I kind of went into The Last Dance. I hadn't been interviewed, and I'm wondering, am I going to turn up in any of the footage? So first of all, the Vegas trip, which I kind of remember during that season, that last season in Chicago, I immediately started getting texts from some people like, hey, were you on that trip? And I kind of had to go, wait, was I? I don't think I was on that one, but there were a few.
Right.
I'm trying to, I'm looking at the timing. Was it during the football season? Probably not, but that was, it was kind of weird not to remember that it was such a blur. And then I just, I guess I'm amazed that there's so little footage that has surfaced. And I know it was a different era, thank God, without cell phone cameras and all that. But, we were pretty conspicuous. When we would go out in Chicago, for example, we would have dinner in front of everybody. We would go to Crowbar, a pulsating club full of, 1,000+ people, and no VIP room, we were right there in the middle of everything all the time. It was packed, and you had to stay tight to move around when we'd go to the next place, but it was no secret. And he was very predictable. That he had about 5 places he ate dinner. He had a couple places he ate lunch, and a few clubs he went out to, a gay bar. It wasn't, and a strip club. It wasn't unpredictable where he'd be, and it wasn't a secret. And it just amazes me. I guess it's probably a good thing, but it just amazes me that there's not more footage of what we were doing. I remember vividly, we were at the Mirage in Vegas where Rodman used to go until I think he was banned at one point after a drunken incident, I think leaving Las Vegas style. But we were at the Mirage, and we're playing craps out in the middle of everything, and random people are coming by and being part of the table, and Dennis is talking to everyone, and it was, as overt of a celebrity scene as you'll ever see. And I remember Dennis at one point went to the bathroom, and he kind of pointed to this little room in the middle of everything, little cordoned off area, kind of half room, and there were a couple of tables in there, and he said, see that? He said, that's where Michael goes when he comes here. It's just him and a dealer alone playing cards in that room, and nobody can get in. And I just said, that doesn't look very fun. He said, no, I don't see how it could be. And just, such a different approach. Now, and I don't want to compare the two. Michael Jordan was a more massive celebrity, and rightfully so. We're talking about, one of the most significant athletes in the history of all sports. And, but Dennis was, Dennis was the closest thing to that in sports at that time, just because of the public theater and the weirdness and the loudness of it all. So it was just such a divergent approach.
So I guess my question for you, Mike, is what was your interaction with Jordan at all? I mean, did Jordan look at you like you were an enabler or an interloper? Or because how does it it's amazing they won basketball games at the clip that they did with everything that's going on. I mean, I know we're hearing about what a rock scene it was, but this truly was a rock star setting for the NBA. And so how did Jordan view you? Take me into that part, Mike.
I don't think he was thrilled to not. I don't think it was personal, but I just think I was just another guy that was around Dennis and doing stuff with Dennis and rolling in to the practice facility with Dennis at 9 a.m. when he probably hadn't slept much. And I wouldn't say enabler, but just part of the show. Although I will say this, Jordan knew that he, for the most part, could control Dennis in all things basketball, and you see that in the show, and there's no way it would have worked otherwise, because David Robinson wasn't controlling Dennis right at that point, and certainly after he left the Bulls, he was more wayward. But Jordan was still Jordan. So but it is really significant, right? Like, think, how would Peyton Manning look at me if I were rolling into the Colts or Broncos orbit during those heyday times with a football player living like Dennis Rodman?
Right.
He probably would want to rip my throat out deep inside.
Right.
So, yeah, I had great interactions with Jordan. It was fine. He was, it reminded me a lot of Jerry Rice. I came in covering the 49ers in the late 80s or 89 and then the early 90s, and that was as close to a rock star situation for a football team at that point, with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and Ronnie Lott and the ostentatiousness. It was amazing. So, Jerry Rice to me was so maniacally driven and humorless and had to win everything all the time, and I was around him every day, and we got along great. We had our ups and downs. We had some bad moments where but he was not a joy to be around. It was unrelenting, and it wore on everybody, but it also made sense to me that he was the absolute best ever to do it, because that's what you want. It would have bummed me out if some guy who didn't seem to try that hard or didn't seem to care that much was also the greatest. Like, at least this guy was insufferable, but it led to something. And I think that's how it was with Michael. And, I remember when Sports Illustrated sent me out in the 96-97 season, so the spring of 97, to do a story on Steve Kerr. We had been high school writing partners, and, now here he was and here I was, and it was a cool story. So my wife and I and our newborn daughter, who's now 23, flew out there and stayed with Steve and Margot and their young family, and spent a bunch of days out there, and it was awesome. And Steve had joined the team Steve had been on the team, and Jordan had come back the year before, and they famously got into a fight like at the first practice, and Jordan punched him in the face, and it was they ended up becoming close, and Steve hit the game-winning shot in the NBA Finals. It was awesome. So, he's kind of really, for the first time, laying that whole scene out for me. And, he said, dude, I'm sitting in practice, and I can tell Jordan doesn't like me, or he's mad, he's not into me, and he's provoking me. And finally, he's about to, he pushes me. And he said, I got two choices, and they're not good choices. I can, wuss out and be basically, consigned consigned to the garbage bin in his eyes and my teammates' eyes forever, or I can fight Michael Jordan. And so he fought Michael Jordan and lost, and and lived through it. But I remember at one point Steve's son Nick, who is now a couple years older than my daughter, but he was very young, and I said, he said, yeah, Nick and, Michael's kids shoot around sometimes and, before practice. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, if you played Michael Jordan in horse and you beat him, could you, laugh about it the next day or make a comment about it? And Steve, looked at me dead serious, and he was like, no way, no chance. And I said, well, what if Nick beat Michael's son? What could you make a joke about that? And he's like, absolutely not, no. So, I hope people appreciate that the most about Jordan, that it was, sure, he could be funny and charming and he had his outside interests, but it was relentless And, I don't think it's that unlike your Bradys and your Mannings and your Rices, but, there's a method to the success.
So a few minutes I have left with you, Mike Silver. When was the last time you spoke to Rodman? What's your relationship like with him now?
It's good. It's sporadic. It's funny. I forgot the last time I talked to him on the phone. It was probably, I don't know, maybe about 9 months ago or so. But you always forget that Rodman's way of ending phone conversations is that he decides at some point in the conversation that it's over and hangs up with zero warning.
Really?
And, I used to, kind of factor that into the process. But, when you don't talk to him as much, it always catches you off guard. And, one thing that was fun is that, and Rodman, people don't understand, the sensitivity sometimes. He's, he wants to please. When he's got a great BS detector, so if he thinks you're full of it, he tunes out. But if you're someone that he wants to, connect with, he's, there's kind of a sweetness about him that, I think some people miss. So as the Warriors started getting really good, he and I talked a couple times about him showing up to a game, or both of us going to one of the finals games, maybe on the road, and we tried to kind of connect that a couple of times. But at one point, he called me, and my daughter Natalie was in the car, and I think I put her on speaker. And there's this photo I posted recently from that same trip I referenced to Chicago to do the story with Steve, where he's walking out. He emerges from the locker room. He's wearing this top with gold sequins and all this stuff, and she's kind of pulling at his top. She's 6 months old, mesmerized by the shininess, and he's literally trying to hand her a can of beer for laughs. But it's one of the SI photographers took the shot. It's a great shot. So he started talking to Natalie and got kind of emotional, and we took him way back. Well, Natalie, it turned out, went to Cal. And Maddie Kerr, Steve's daughter, was a volleyball star there a year ahead of her, and they became friends as adults. And they were at a party one night and jokingly flipped off the camera and sent me the picture. And I think Maddie actually sent me the picture. And so at one point I sent it to Dennis, after we had spoken, just to kind of go, hey, look, dude, it's little Maddie and little Natalie. And he called me as soon as I sent it, kind of all upset, and he thought they were flipping him off and wanted to know, what had happened. And I was like, no, it was a joke. They're flipping me off, and I kind of had to talk him down. So, I really, listen, I'm really touched by some of the things he did for me at the time. I was a young Sports Illustrated writer. I wrote that cover story. There were some outrageous quotes in there and subject matter that was not generally talked about in SI. He went on David Letterman right afterwards. I know he had been advised by someone very close to him to deny everything in the story subsequently, that was the best strategy. And David Letterman, who was the biggest thing in the world back then, asked him point blank twice, held up the magazine and said, does this accurately represent you? Did you say these things? And both times he just unflinchingly said, absolutely, it was a great story. I love it. And so, I'll always remember that when the heat really got turned up, he stayed true to the process, and he frustrates the heck out of me, like he does a lot of people. I would liken it to, it's like your best friend when you're 10. It's the greatest thing, but sometimes you need to have an emotionally developed conversation, and you want to strangle him, but lovingly so. So I got nothing but love for Dennis, and he's a work in progress, but he's done a lot of cool things.
Perfect guy to ask the poll question as we end. And by the way, I will say goodbye. I'm not just going to hang up on you, Rodman style. Okay, Michael? So,
that would have been cool.
No. I know. It would have been good for the joke, but I just still can't do that. I'm a Jewish goodbye guy. Rodman's the exact opposite, obviously. So ask the poll question of Michael Silver. That's at Rich Eisen Show for people to vote on right now.
Yeah, Mike, which Last Dance style doc would you want to see next? One about the Brady Belichick Patriots, the 90s Cowboys, or the Shaq Kobe Lakers?
I'm going off the board. I'm going 80s and early 90s Niners because then I could be all over it. And I would also like to pour some liquor out for someone near and dear to Rich and my heart, fictional Carl, the Jets fan from Curb, who never got a chance to say goodbye.
Okay, so the 80s, should we add the 80s, 90s Niners? Just real quick, Michael. So give me some, what would be the beats, to use the, I guess, phrase?
Well, it's going to take too long, but let me just say this. The people freaking out because the Packers drafted Jordan Love and how's that going to work with Aaron Rodgers? Steve Young and Joe Montana were on the same team for 6 years. There were times where they alternated starts. There was a game where Young played the first half and Montana played the second half just to see what would happen. And they did not get along, and it was insane. And they're both first ballot Hall of Famers, and people have no idea.
Then Bill Walsh was in the middle of it, right? And there's Jerry Rice.
Walsh was in the middle of it. Seifert was in the middle of it. I was in the middle of it. It was awesome. Very quickly, Steve Young tells this great story where he says to Aaron Rodgers after Rodgers' 2010 MVP season, the next year they're talking about it, and Aaron's telling him about the whole season, and Steve says, "Oh yeah, and where was Brett during that?" And Aaron goes, "Huh?" He goes, "Where was Brett?" He's like, "I don't know, Mississippi." And Steve goes, "Yeah, when I had my first MVP season, Joe was on the sideline staring at me." I mean, people would be amazed by some of the things some of the coexistence that had to happen back in the day.
And now your Fail Mary friend is in the role of Favre. Isn't that amazing? When it comes down to
it is.
I am mandated to ask you. I know we've been talking for a while, and I don't know if you have got anything to do else on this Wednesday. But
no, I'm good.
Okay, what do you think? How do you think Rodgers is reacting to this?
That's a great question. I've not directly spoken to him. Okay. I believe that if he's upset inside, he's very mindful of the optics and is playing it off well. But I don't know. I think it clearly was a move by management. I think the more there's a chance that, and I would advise management to play it this way too. There's a chance that it can be coaches and Rodgers against the man, and that's probably the best thing short term for the organization if that's how it goes, and I don't think that would be inaccurate, but I think the opportunity cost is more the issue than the young guy on the roster who could theoretically replace him. Aaron Rodgers knows he's the best quarterback there and will be, and he's not worried so much about that, I think it's what could they have done with that pick and what did they do with the subsequent picks, and you can understand how that would be frustrating.
Well, I mean, Favre came on this show 1 week ago on this very day and termed that opportunity cost as a burned bridge. That's how he termed that opportunity cost, said that it was going to rear its ugly head. You call it opportunity cost. He called it something that would definitely get the wheels turning in Rodgers' head, that will wind up with Rodgers wearing a different uniform a la Brady, Manning, and everybody else from that, I guess, era.
I would not discount anything that Brett says about the subject, A, because he and Aaron have a good relationship now, and I know they talked, as Brett said, and B, because very few people have lived those things, but Brett is one of them, and I've seen it happen with Montana. I've seen it happen with Favre. I saw Marino basically told, "You're done," and he had to decide whether to go to the Steelers or retire. See Troy Aikman be told, "You're done, and you can go somewhere else or retire." Steve Young, was probably at the end of the line if he decided to come back, and Peyton Manning, and now Brady, a little different, but yeah, it's never easy. It's never smooth. It's never seamless. The closest we got to that was Elway with the storybook walk-off, second consecutive Super Bowl win. But organizationally, they really paid a price. They had a very tumultuous, aftermath. So, I get why the Packers would be looking ahead. I've heard some amazing things about Jordan Love. I think Aaron, as long as the kid's not entitled, which I don't believe he will be from what I've heard, I think Aaron will treat him fine. And I think in the short term, he'll be motivated even more, or as much as, and not more, but he'll be locked in as much as he's ever been. But I don't discount anything Brett says about that, because they can have a conversation on a much different level than any of us can.
Mike, you're the man. Appreciate it. Are you part of this schedule release show tomorrow, or you just?
I will be watching you.
Okay.
The reshuffling of the cards. I've been fortunate enough to be in that room with you when it happens.
Oh, yeah, man.
I think it's one of your. I don't think it's as easy of an endeavor as it looks, and it always, when you're there to carry it, it always feels good. But
thanks,
I'm
man.
excited to watch you guys. We're not as, I'm sure most of your viewers and listeners know that as a network, we're not operational the way we normally would be, and we're obviously contending with this unique situation like everybody else. But, I think what we've been able to do has been kind of uplifting, just, for those of us who know how tough it is to do this stuff. We're trying hard to provide a diversion for everybody, and I'm excited to watch what you guys have going.
Appreciate it, Mike. I'm just as good as I want to be. That's all.
You can hang up on me now.
All right, there you go. Hang up on him. That's Michael Silver.
Mike, take it easy.
How great
Thank
was
you.
that?